So I think that a concern which Jordan has, and certainly a concern I have, is if we try this, we can think of all sorts of ways in which it can go wrong. If you take away all that supporting structure, you can think of any number of ways in which it can go wrong. And that I suppose that's at the root of the concern about where you might be taking us. Or to put it another way, if we enter the world that you would suggest, not everyone may necessarily come out as Sam Harris.
Well, give me one way where you think it can go wrong. And again, we can't forget your caveat, which you started with.
What if you're not very smart?
Right. Well,
no,
so,
I don't mean.
So then you're basically saying that the stupid people need their myths. You know, we smart people on stage don't need them.
Right.
But
I actually am saying that to some degree. Look, if you're not exceptionally cognitively astute, you should be traditional and conservative. Because if you can't think well, you're going to think badly. And if you think badly, you're going to fall into trouble. And so it is definitely the case, and this has been what would you call a cliche of political belief for a long time. If you're not very smart, it's better to be conservative. Because then you do what everyone else does. And generally speaking, doing what everyone else does is the path of least error moving forward. Now, that doesn't mean that rationality is unnecessary.
Nor does it mean that all conservatives are stupid.
It doesn't mean that either. Right, precisely. It doesn't mean that either.
Very important caveat.
Yes,
but all conservative structures are not the same either, and that we have many warring and incompatible versions of being conservative.
True. And this is where rationality actually does play its role. Although I don't think it's best conceptualized as rationality precisely, it's definitely the case that to take Douglas's point, that we need to be bound by our traditions, but we need to be judicious in their re-representation and update, and we have to do both.
This is what, in the dialogue on religion, this is what Schopenhauer says. He describes the tragedy of the clergy.
Yeah.
He pretty much says, look, if they don't believe it, they recognize it's a very useful metaphor, but they don't need to believe it. They tell it, and he says the tragedy of the clergy is they can never admit that what they're saying is just a metaphor.
Right. Is this before or after he threw his housekeeper down the stairs?
Look, we can all find flaws.
We all have skeletons in our closet. Yeah.
But yes, that there is a way in which religion is what he describes as philosophy for the masses. And that if you recognize that most people are not going to spend their lives studying philosophy, they're not going to be reading about the differences between Leibniz and Kant, that religion has to do. Now, I'm not saying that I agree with that particularly, but there's a heck of an argument within there, which a lot of people will be living their lives in.
I don't think it's a good argument if you recall or just imagine what it's like to be a child, especially from the perspective of being a parent. I have two young girls, and they're very smart young girls. I mean, they're smart, but one of them's 4.5 years old and knows almost nothing, right? So she knows what I and my wife and our society tell her at some level. I mean, at what point is she going to think for herself about these fundamental questions?